Eliza Joy, thank you so much for sitting down with me today to share your insights, your experience, your wisdom with the audience.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really blessed by having you here, and I've been thinking in preparation for the podcast, like I really want to do a good job because you have so many amazing followers and fans and such an engaged audience. Like I've been following you on your Instagram page, which I'll put in the show notes, and you just share so much wisdom, and I'm like, I really want to do those people justice, your audience. Because I
Oh,
know if they had 45 minutes to sit down with you, they would be like, I want to know this, I want to know that. So I'm gonna try my best, and I feel really lucky to have you here.
that's so sweet. I feel lucky to be here. It's nice. We've talked here and there. And it's always nice, good vibes between us. So I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
Yeah.
likewise. Hey, I think we connected just through the coaching world, and I saw you had your podcast, and actually, I connected with you from Men with Manners,
Yeah.
and from there, I discovered more of your work, which I'll put in the show notes below for everyone to go and check out Eliza, especially her own podcast, Sex Sells, which I was listening to episode 170, and I just thought your insights really resonated with me, like your perspectives on relationships, your past relationships, and navigating the shift from being anxious or avoidant and shifting to more secure attachments within and without. Yeah.
Yeah, important things. It's something that a lot of my clients come to, and so many people hold top tier level of importance to this. And it's one of those things where it's interesting how some coaches and some counselors and therapists don't hold that much importance to it, and others think it's the be all end all of anything to do with relationships. And I kind of sit somewhere right in the middle between the two, I think. So it's an interesting perspective to have, and a really important thing to know about, but it's not anything that happens in your life is not going to be reduced down to what your attachment style is, which I think is the really big takeaway of this, because so many people are like, I didn't get a job. It might be because I'm anxious or avoidant or whatever. And to me, it's more about how does it play out in your relationships and how does it sit with you and how do you function in your day to day life? Is it serving you or is it something that is disrupting you and your progress and your lived experience? So I think that's
Mm.
a really important thing to kind of hash out within yourself.
Definitely. And I really love your perspective on that because there is that middle path, which I'm a big believer in too. And I listen to your podcast and you have these great stories
Oh,
and you
I've
have this
lost
great
you.
perspective, but it's also very human. It's not like really divisive thinking. It's very open. It's very, what do you think? It's very inviting, which I think explains why your audience is so engaged because there is that yin and yang approach. There is like
Mm.
not everything's attached to if you're not drinking filtered water or it's because you're an attachment like XYZ. It's like let's have a broader perspective so we can deepen that understanding of ourselves.
Yeah, I was just talking about that on a podcast. I haven't put it out yet, but that when you go down those rabbit holes, you can just find anything. You're like, is my hormones being disrupted? Is it my anxious attachment disorder? Is it the water I'm drinking? Is it the temperature? Am I not doing cold showers? Like, it's this obsession that we can have of this analysis. And sometimes it's about let's take the analysis aside and just look at what's serving you and what's functioning for you and what's not. And what the parts that aren't functioning for you, let's figure out where they originated from, what purpose they're actually serving you, because anything that's disrupting you in your life is still serving a purpose for you. And let's heal it from there. So sometimes it's like you want to look at the big picture, but you don't want to looking at the big picture is looking at your experience, not every single possible avenue coming into your big picture.
Absolutely. And it's so practical. It's boots on the ground with like what's actually going on in your life. Where are you
Yeah.
actually behaving in
Yeah.
these certain ways? What are you choosing right now? And let's
Hmm.
work with that, which I love that approach.
Hmm.
But before we sort of get into the questions I have that I want to ask you, maybe you could give us a little bit of background about who you are, Eliza, and what you do and what you help people with as well.
Sure. So, oh my God, I haven't given my background in so long to, to someone. But I have a background. I'll start with my academic background. So, I came straight out of high school. I almost dropped out of high school. I had zero direction in life. I wasn't someone that thrived in school at all. But I knew that there was one thing I was really good at, and that was relationships and supporting people. I had a boyfriend from when I was like 14, and everyone in my school would come to me about questions to do with their relationships because we'd been together for like 4 years. And it would be kids from my years, other years. I'd have like year sevens coming to me asking about relationships. I don't know how I became just that kid that everyone would go to. So I knew from then at 17, click, this is what I'm doing. And I really wanted to get into sex ed. That was my big thing, but it's a postgraduate degree. So I started with counseling and behavioral science. I went to uni for that. Then I did sexology, and then I was like, I'm still a bit young. So I went and did life coaching after that. And then after that, I did relationship counseling. And since then, I have worked predominantly, I did a lot of work in the social work field, a lot of work with vulnerable families, young people, really high risk situations, a lot on child protection as well. And I kept saying to myself, while I'm in my 20s, I will work for the community. And by the time I'm 30, I'll be working for myself. And so 29, I quit my job. And well, I had a baby as well. And then, started working for myself in my own business, doing exactly what I've always dreamt of doing for the last 10 years. I've held on to this dream. So it's been exactly what I wanted. It's all come to fruition almost to plan. So yeah,
Wow, that's
and
amazing.
now what my what my dream is and what I actually do is I'm a therapeutic coach. So I see a lot of clients to help them overcome barriers that they're in their personal lives or in their relationships. I see individuals and I see couples, and we work together on a one-on-one. It's all online as well, which is an amazing thing as well. So yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. I love my work. I'm so happy to be living in alignment.
And it seems like that, and you can get that energy. You can really sense that from the things you post. So for those listening, check out Eliza's Instagram, follow her, look at her stories because she shares such valuable things with that very holistic perspective and wise perspective, which is obviously a result of her years and years of experience with working with real world shit. So thank you, Eliza, for that. And I wonder just from the get-go, like it is a bit elusive, the whole secure attachment, the whole secure self. And I wonder from your perspective, what does a secure attachment style look like in practice?
So it basically means that within a relationship, whether that be a relationship with family, friends, but predominantly a romantic relationship, that you're open to communication, you're open to intimacy, receiving affection, and most importantly, you feel that there are no barriers holding you back to expressing your needs, wants, and boundaries. But that's just majority of the time because in any relationship, there are going to be times where you feel anxious, you feel avoidant. Those are normal. There's going to be times where you don't feel comfortable expressing yourself, but it's for the most part you feel safe enough to do so. And the other big element as well is that the reassurance and comfort, a lot of that comes internally rather than seeking it from an external source.
I love to
Yeah.
hear about that because I find on my journey, I was constantly looking for things externally to
Mm.
bring me that sense of esteem,
Yeah.
security, confidence. But as soon as I started to think about like, where is my sense of security from within come from? How can I cultivate that? Which then led me to actually going up to people and introducing myself and going on dates and eventually meeting my girlfriend offline in a really organic way at a cafe and now we live together, and I share that story and everyone's like, oh, I love that. I want to hear more about it. It's inspiring. And I wonder, Eliza, from your perspective, how can people start to meet people organically and feel comfortable in their own skin as well, because I think it's such an individual nuanced journey and we can only talk so much about it without some real solid examples, but I'd love to hear your perspective on that because I know you work in this realm.
Yeah, it's so funny you mention you and your relationship because I love your story too. And I only had that brief snippet where you told me how you guys met. You responded to something on my Instagram. And then I hope you don't mind, I used your story I did a training for a group of men on actually approaching people organically. And I'm like, this is the best actual real life scenario of this working out, where it was, I think from memory, I was like heavily pregnant when I did it, so excuse my baby brain, but you approached her in a cafe and you mentioned her Virgo necklace, and it's just that like, and you'd seen her before as well, so you kind of had already gained that familiarity, like in passing, smiles here and there or whatever. And then you approached her about something that she's clearly interested in. She's wearing a necklace that says Virgo or has the Virgo symbol, and then you're a Virgo as well, so you have something in common, and you're also indicating like, hey, like I know about horoscopes, I'm interested in this as well, so you've got mutual ground. I just think it is so beautiful, and it was such like an organic, perfect scenario. So I absolutely love your love story, and I'm so happy to hear as well that you've moved in together and you guys are progressing really beautifully. So that's amazing. And the biggest thing I tell my clients, so I guess your question kind of comes in two parts. The meeting organically, the biggest thing I say is sometimes our minds go straight to if I'm single and I want to meet someone, let's get out, go drinking or get out on the bars or whatever. And if that's not something that is part of your everyday weekend life, don't do that. Like, you need to find something that aligns with you. And it's so a lot of the time, some of the men I work with say things like, well, I'm into nerdy things like Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, that's amazing. Join groups, join board game groups, go to libraries. Like, even at the gym, I'm a bit like, I'm 50-50 on the gym, because I also know I put a poll on my Instagram ages ago, and it was like, women, are you comfortable being approached at the gym? And 50% said yes, and 50% said no, this is my space, please leave me alone. So that was interesting. But yeah, find something that aligns to you. And when it comes to overcoming that barrier, a lot of us have narratives around dating that hold us back. So it might be a fear of rejection. For a lot of the men I worked with in this group program, it was, I'm not rich enough, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not fit enough or tall enough, all of these like materialistic things that were holding them back. And something that I teach my clients to work with is that our egos run narratives that it's going to want to prove to us. Even if your ego is running a narrative, people think, oh, ego must be like talking up yourself. No, it's just a narrative that it's created in some way to keep you safe. And then it's going to find ways and bias to prove that. So if you say girls don't want me because I'm not attractive enough, you are going to show up in a way and give off an energy to women that says, don't approach me, or I'm unattractive, maybe not necessarily through looks, but through my actions, because your ego is subconsciously driving your behavior to prove that narrative. So it's really about shifting from going from a point of self-shame and self-punishment to motivate you into things, and come from a place of self-love and self-compassion. And I find this work really hard to do with men in particular compared to women, with overcoming that self-shame disciplined aspect and moving into self-compassion. There's a lot of resistance for it, but it's like, understand that your strengths, like things that you perceive as weaknesses, can be your strengths. It can be the fact that you're nerdy and you love Dungeons and Dragons. There's so many women that love that. It can be the fact that you're introverted and you don't like going out. Great, a homebody. That's, people might make associations like, he's loyal, he's going to be at home, we're going to be cuddling on a Friday night, that's my dream. Like, stop creating narratives in your head, and it's really hard to do, that hold you back in life and prevent you from things. And the reason we create these narratives is our body's way or our subconscious's way to keep us in a comfort zone or keep us resisting things that we haven't quite healed within ourselves yet. Does that make sense? Sorry, I just rambled on so long.
So much sense. And thank you for the ramble, because constantly I'm picking up on things. I'm like, yes, absolutely. I want to learn more about that. And for those listening, a reminder, Eliza has an incredible podcast called Sex Sells, which I'll put in the show notes below. I'll put Eliza's Instagram so that you can check that out. And I want to talk about that, Eliza, real quickly, because personally, when I was single, I would punish the shit out of myself. I would have that disciplined approach, whether it was, I need to get a six-pack, I need to be fitter, I need to be healthier, I need to be more confident. I need to talk to at least 3 girls today. And if I don't, then what's wrong with you? Like, I'd really punish myself. I'd really beat myself up with these situations. Or I would see someone and be like, go up and talk to her, Jess. Like, what's the problem? And and then I would constantly just sit there in a cafe and just rain my energy down and just be like, oh, this is so annoying, because then I would leave, I wouldn't have done it, I'd beat myself up, and it would constantly affirm that narrative of like, you can't do this, you're never going
Yeah.
to meet someone organically like this, you're going to have to rely on the dating apps, which just made me feel just gross, because I was like, I would spend maybe a week there and I'd be like, I don't want to do this anymore. And yeah, that punishment thing was really in my head, and I was really obsessed with it for a long time when I was single.
It's really interesting how prevalent this is, especially amongst men. And I think that a really big part of it is that it's easier to feel self-punishment and come from that than rather than come from self-compassion. Because sometimes when men are experiencing that self-compassion, like it's okay, especially when it's something you want, like a romantic relationship, you can get flooded with emotions. You can get flooded like with that when you speak to your inner child and say, like I say to my client, if a kid came to you, a 16-year-old or 15-year-old boy came to you and said he can't talk to girls and he hates himself, or what would you say to that kid? And sometimes just asking that question is enough to bring up like a really emotional response from someone that claims that they have no emotions and can't respond emotionally or whatever. So it's that avoidant of stepping into recognizing our feelings. And another really big part of that rejection fear, like that keeps us stuck from approaching someone, is I tell my clients, and a like little reframe I do is that sometimes it's not actually the rejection that we're fearing, but it's the way that you're going to feel about yourself afterwards, like exactly how you felt when you would leave the cafe being like, I hadn't done it, you hadn't even been rejected, but it's just that feeling that would arise in you. It's like that self rejection. Like if you're already going to be dealing with one potential romantic rejection, don't reject yourself either. Like you got to have your back. You got to you got to be there patting your back and being your own hype man kind of thing.
So true. And I love and adore that question about the inner teenager work there. So thank you for
Mm.
that. And I might share as well something that really helped me in that journey from moving from that discipline and self-punishment to more self-compassion was I stopped waiting around for other people and a dream of having someone else to start just living my best life. And I found that I was like, I don't want to keep waiting around for people. I just felt like it was a constant just being like, when's this going to happen? What's going to happen? You know, and I was constantly sort of looking around doing this instead of focusing on what does Jesse really want and like what does he want to go for? Which
Yeah.
was, I want to travel. I want to pack my bags and I want to go to Bali. I want to move to the Gold Coast. I want to go overseas and travel. I want to go to Europe. That was just a big goal of mine. I was constantly sort of waiting for someone to do that with, and have that experience with. And I just decided, no, I want to do this for me. I want to travel with myself, get to know myself more. And long story short, it was actually when I moved to Queensland and I was living that life and my energy was good. I was confident because I was trusting myself and I was relying on myself. That's when I met my girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't it just so amazing? It's like from a spiritual perspective, you've kind of like you've lived life in alignment, so you're attracting that on your own wavelength. And from a psychological perspective, you've overcome your barriers, you've overcome the limiting beliefs just by living life in the way that you actually were wanting to live it. And I think that the way that you described it is so amazing because so many people are like, send that message like as soon as you stop looking for the loved one, they're going to come into your life. And I was talking to a guy recently talking about how everyone kept saying that. So he went to work as a tradie where it was 90% men. This is a straight man as well, seeking a woman. And then he would go home and spend every night and every weekend at home. And he wasn't on the dating apps, but because he wasn't seeking it, he was like, why haven't I found someone? And I was like, well, how is it possible that someone finds someone unless you have a postman or postwoman or something coming to your house? Like where it's about living when you live life in the way that you are meant to live and in alignment to your own core beliefs and goals, it opens up things and it unlocks things within you that allows you to accept and allows you to accept the approach of other people, but also being able to go to them and approach that and seek that. It opens that positive energy for seeking rather than the negative energy of like, I can't bear this Bumble experience anymore and seeking through that way. So I love the way that you've done it is literally the top tier. Goal way that people should aim for, men and women, and they and them, of course, should aim for this specific approach on when it comes to love.
Yeah, that's beautiful to hear, and thank you. And I just want to say, like, it's been a journey. It's not always been like that, and it's been
Mm.
mess. And maybe that's a conversation for another time with my past relationships. But yeah, it's definitely taken a lot of inner exploration and inner work, which is why coaches and therapists are so important because they give us a dedicated space to go into that
Yeah.
realm each week. Instead of just maybe relying on our friends or our family or our journal or our own inner thoughts sort of swirling around. I've really found I've made the most gains in that area when I've sat down with a qualified professional that's
Yeah.
invested in my growth, and I've made so much progression there because they're with me, say in my pocket on Messenger coaching, and I'm on a date, and they're talking me through what's happening internally with those anxious thoughts, or maybe with those obsessive thoughts, or with maybe red flags that I'm not seeing. So yeah, that's really helped me get to this point where I'm really, really proud of. But
Yeah.
just on this wavelength as well, Eliza, when people are in singledom and they're getting anxious of like, I need to do this now, or it's been a really long time that maybe they've never had a girlfriend or a partner, what would you say to them in this journey that they're on? Because like you've said, they're moving towards something that they want deep down.
Yeah, it's really hard because sometimes when you get to that point where you're like, I've been doing this, I've been waiting for years, or I've held myself back for years and now I'm ready and I want it right now, it's a dangerous and slippery slope because one, you bring out an energy of desperation and urgency, which isn't, it's going to repel people, first of all, and it's not going to feel comfortable. It's not exciting. It's usually coming from a place of discomfort and relying on that I need this person or this experience to make me feel comfortable. And secondly, when you meet that person or you have that interaction, all your eggs are going in their basket. Like you're invested and you're already projecting that future scenario. Like I had a client who was very much exactly how you described. He was ready, and he was a bit older, so he was like, I really, really want someone. And then as soon as he met someone, he was like, well, she might be moving away and she might be doing this, so I have to like take all these things in consideration. And I'm like, you do have to consider these things, but it's also like your first date and your first interaction. And when you're thinking like, he was like, maybe I'd move overseas with her. Like when you think that much into the future before you've even on your first date or before you've even had your first date, you're setting yourself up for severe disappointment because if you get rejected, you're not only dealing with a rejection or if it doesn't work out, even regardless of who rejects who, but then you have to deal with the grief of your fantasy not being true. And we can be in love with the fantasies that we have about someone. We can have our mind set on a dream with someone and project that out. And then when that dream is taken away from us, that's what hurts more than the actual person saying like, hey, we don't gel well. I don't want to continue dating. So it's really important that I remind my clients, like, wind yourself back as much as it's really comes down to self will. You gotta wind yourself back and put two eggs in their basket, and go from there. And I'm speaking like almost as a hypocrite because I had one of those relationships where it was like when I met my husband, it was bang bang bang, lovers, soulmates, and straight to moving in, kids, marriage, moving up the coast. But I always say, like, when people bring that up, like, okay, but I did study for 10 years about relationships and I knew exactly what to look for. So I found it just happened to work. But for pretty much the whole population,
Yeah.
I say you have to wind it back. You gotta slow it down.
That's such a funny story, and I believe you talk about that on episode
Yeah.
170 of the Sex Cells podcast.
Uh,
And it's a good analogy. You had studied for 10 years. It's like you're an investor. It's like
yeah.
you've studied the stock markets, you've studied human psychology for 10 years. You know what's worth putting your eggs in your basket. But just for the common person, probably don't follow that advice. Otherwise, you're going
Yeah,
to be disappointed.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, don't move in after like 6 weeks like I did.
Yeah, my goodness, it's so good. But you have such a beautiful relationship with Adrian, your two kids, and it's
Yeah.
it's lovely to see. Which I really do wonder, Eliza, and maybe this is a question that I can only really know once I have children. But how has having a newborn in your life right now changed you, changed your mind, changed your soul? I wonder.
It's it's really different. I was actually thinking about this before one of the big things that's been on my mind recently, it's completely unrelated to me, but I think for my clients, is the pressure of hustle culture. And I think that, in my opinion, that hustle culture is a scam. And before I had babies, I was so into that. I was like, wake up at 5 a.m., do all these things, go to work an extremely stressful and traumatic role. You know, I might take kids home, you know, out of their families that day, and then they're living in a hotel. And then I come home and I'm like, okay, I got to do some like Pilates, I got to do some stretching, I got to do some, you know, well, really what I wanted to do is like rot on the couch and just rest. And it's just that exhaustion and burnout of that hustle culture, drawn into that self development kind of area, which of course, like you and I both work within the realm of self development, and we know that it's so important and so essential. But I also think that the desperation and urgency for self development, where it's all encompassing, can be a dangerous slippery slope as well, where it's like it's a projection of insecurities. It's another way to self punish. Like, I didn't meditate today, I didn't do this today. And basically, to summarize it all, when I had a baby, like my priorities completely shifted. I stopped caring about any of those things. I did not care about getting $10,000 pay rises every single year and putting a figure on it. It was, and I remember saying to like Adrian, like, I'm going to go back to work at like 4 to 6 months. No, it took 2 years off. I had like, there was no way I was leaving my babies. It just completely shifted. And it's interesting as well because I would see other people that like became, parents, and sometimes I would think, that's kind of sad, like you gave up all your dreams, you sacrificed all these things. But I really think that having that, I started my business when I was in my early pregnancy, or maybe even just, actually I wasn't pregnant, I think I had already had Remy. And had that not happened, had that not been in my life path, I wouldn't be where I am today, making money, working on my own. So it all kind of set me up for the right thing. And I really feel like for me, it was my dream coming true. But that being said, you know, having worked years in child protection and working with a lot of people, like parenting is not always the kids are the answer. Like, it's extremely taxing, it's extremely stressful. I was saying to Jessey before I came on last night, I got like an hour and 47 minutes sleep. Like, it's just so much that it takes a lot from you. So you have to be someone that could pour from their cup constantly, and some people are like that and some people aren't. So it's a tricky one to balance. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is what I love about your voice and what you share, is that it has that holistic approach and you say it as it is.
Yeah.
And I really found that similar thing where it was self-development became this projection of insecurity, and it took me years to get through that and really find my own perspective. And because when you're new to the self-development world, especially as a coach who wants to run their own business, you're excited, you want to get into things, you want to learn more. But I found that often habits are like ramps, and they're leading us to a certain state of being. And to get obsessed just with the ramp, I think is pointless, because if I'm just obsessing over the journaling, the meditation, the ice baths, the Wim Hof, the diet, the water, like,
Yeah.
I think I'm missing the point, because they're ramps which lead me to a certain state of being to live my earthly mission. And my earthly mission is bigger than just my habits. You know, it's like, what am I meant to do here? What's my purpose? They're just helping me elevate my energy to get to that point to live it forward. But I found that I would be obsessed there. I'd be in groups, I'd be in challenges, and it would be all that self-discipline and that very punishing energy, when I would come to the realization that I'm a very holistic person. I'm a very kind person. I'm a very soft person. I'm an emotional person. And that's my earthly mission, because I'm a healer, you know.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to get through that.
I love that analogy of the Rams. I'm stealing that. I'll credit you.
Take it
But
away.
that is so beautiful. And I think when we feel good when we do all these things temporarily, like when we overwhelm ourselves with these self-help tasks and things like that, because it feels productive, and it's almost a way of actually avoiding doing the meeting your emotions and doing that work as well. Like you kind of have to, like I always say, you kind of have to combine the therapeutic aspect as well as the somatic aspect and as well as that embodiment. It's a perfect balance between the two. But a lot of us just go straight into one, whether like I'm only going to do talk therapy and I only want to process it but not do anything, or I'm only going to be doing journaling and this and that. And it's really about what works for you as an individual. And that's something that I learned in one of your workshops that I did. And I had done a business workshop prior to yours, and it was like, if you're not like doing this, this, and this, and this, you're not going to be successful. And I was like, I feel so sleazy doing all these things. And then I spoke to you, and you're like, you don't have to do that. Like, just do it the way you want, basically. And like, and I was like, oh my God, just that permission. And that's, I guess, wrapping back around to why it's another important part of having someone to guide you is like, first of all, there's psychoeducation and that informing and teaching us and rewiring of us and bringing out blind spots that we're not aware of. But a lot of it is just permission granting as well. Like, yep, you can do that. Like, that's okay. You can go for that goal. You can try for that dream. You can just post what you want. Like, just it's that simple, really.
Yeah, we get to do it our way, and you're so right. And I found that through all the self-development work and relational work and deep coaching, I found that it's less about adding to you and it's about reducing. It's about chipping
Yeah.
away the things that are not you to just
Yeah.
reveal your normal self. And it's a very neutral expression. I usually say to my clients, you got to learn to stand your sacred ground, which is when you feel comfortable in your own skin and your voice and your space and who you are. That's your sacred ground. You're not puffing up. You're not shrinking. It's just who you are in its essence. And I find that that journey is very personal and intimate to everyone. Everyone has their own journey and story along that path. And I love to hear about it in my podcast. I
Yeah.
love to hear about it in my coaching. So thank you for sharing that with us, Eliza, as well.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's beautiful, and I love that about the chipping away to who you are at your essence. And it takes the pressure off when you frame it that way. It takes like a whole, like, I don't have to overhaul my life. I just have to remove the things that aren't serving me, and unpack where I really am and what I really want in life and how I want to like live spiritually, energetically, physically. That's
Mm.
beautiful.
I would love to ask you a bit of a challenging question now, if that's all
Hmm.
right.
Yeah.
How can someone rebuild their confidence after a difficult breakup?
Oh, it's so hard when it comes to love, because in any other situation where if you get fired from a job or something tough happens, your house, I don't know, falls apart, you can reframe it in a way that this isn't a projection of you, or it's not a meaning of your personality or your character. But when it comes to relationship and how literally how you relate with someone, it can be a projection of yourself and a projection of your character. It can feel that way. So it's really hard to kind of come to wraps with that, and not a lot of people get into a slump of low self-esteem and they're struggling with that after a breakup. And I think that the message that I tell my clients, that a lot of my clients actually come to me for breakups, and processing breakups, and some of it is like okay, sometimes we have to just sit in it and we have to feel it. Like I had a client who had a really, really traumatic ending to his marriage, and it's so sad what happened, where essentially, actually, I won't give too many details, but it was really sad. And he was kind of thinking like, what do I do? What steps can I take? And I was like, for now, like based on the severity of like a marriage breaking down and not being able to process it because it happens so suddenly without notice, basically, just sit in it. Just feel it. You got to work your way through it. If you want to have a shitty day, you can have a shitty day. Allow yourself to be and experience those emotions. Grief is a part of that human experience. Without grief, we can't experience love and joy and all these positive emotions. I mean, that's that balance of that human experience. So sit in that grief. If you want to watch
Mm.
reality TV and binge eat for 2 days straight and cry and scream, whatever, you can do that. Like, get in it and do it. Like, feel it, like, really feel it. But then once you've gone and got through that, like, couple of days of like feeling like in the dregs of the very bottom of the barrel, I want you to take one step. one little finger out, and whether that means you call a friend or you cook a meal rather than ordering in, like you don't have to process everything at once. It's 1% at a day's time. Like really gentle approach. A big part of it and building that confidence is not only overcoming and processing the breakup, but self-compassion and self-empathy, which I know you talk about and I talk about. And like I said at the start, when you bring up self-compassion, I can almost feel the eye roll of my clients like, oh, that's not the answer I was looking for. But it's so important. Like you have to be gentle with yourself, and you have to be like, you know what? I can feel shit in this moment. I can feel like I'm struggling, and that's okay. But tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to call my mom, or I'm going to go to that coffee shop and I'm just going to sit and watch the waves and breathe a little bit. Like just that. Like don't put this huge mounting task. And once you get through these things, like time doesn't heal all wounds, but it heals a lot of it. It takes some of the edge off. And then the rest of it is about you're going to come through the other end of that 10 times better if you can bring into that self-compassion and empathy for self throughout this process. And that's about building your confidence and healing. So once you're healed, your confidence will be there. But if you just rely on just time to pass, you are not going to be healed, and you're going to be carrying those wounds into your future relationships and future interactions. And sometimes, you know what, sitting and honoring those shitty emotions is part of healing.
So true. And you shared on your story actually just yesterday what got you through a breakup. And I popped in the
Yeah.
answer box, block them,
Yeah.
block their friends, block their family, just for a
Love it.
couple of months, which was what I needed to get through a breakup in the past, just to create space from seeing them online, from knowing that they can contact you, to knowing that I could, potentially contact them.
Yeah.
And you had some really other good answers as well on your story.
Yeah. And I think actually a really big one, like my biggest tip is don't seek closure. It's not going to come from them. It's going to come from within. And we use seeking closure as a way to subconsciously rationalize reaching out to them again, or starting an argument with them, or wanting to like, oh, I need to express myself. I want to express my frustration. So I'm going to like, give myself the narrative and believe the narrative that I'm seeking closure. You don't need closure. If your relationship ends, you find closure from within, not from them and not from anyone else, unless it's like a coach or therapist.
So true, because it's like, oh, I want to be able to have a nice ending to this. I want an end point. I want closure on that. But sometimes we just have to hold space for that. It's not going to be like that. And it's actually quite open, and it's your decision to cut that out. And I recommend cord cutting meditations all the time, just to
Yeah.
create some energetic space from your past and the memories and the temptations as well. And I think we're also on our own hero's journey here. And if maybe your clients listening to this are struggling with that self-compassion piece, you got to ask yourself, like, what would the hero do in this time when they're hurting and they're grieving? How would they treat themselves? They often go off into nature to reflect
Yes.
and to be with themselves and be present, so that
Yes.
they can come back stronger.
Absolutely. It's such an innate, like, you got to follow those innate cravings. Like, I remember when I spoke to a guy and he was like, I just want to, like, I'm so depressed. I'm so angry. I just want to go to, like, some third world country and just hole up in a hut for a little bit. And I was like, just do it. Like, go travel. If that's what you decide. If you want isolation, why not travel? But first of all, let's just like set some set some parameters here. Like, are you safe? Are you okay? Like, once we get through that. But if you're desiring isolation where you go into nature and you completely immerse, go and do it. Like my husband, he's the same. Every time he's stressed, he creates a fire in a backyard, like in a fire pit, and he goes out, and him and my son, who's 2, they make like little huts and they saw down branches. Like, it's just such an innate part of us. And sometimes that's more common for men, and often women, they desire that vulnerability of sharing and that verbal processing with someone else, and that validation piece can be really, really healing. So they crave going out and repeating their story. So maybe they have 3 coffees in a row with 3 different friends, and they're rehashing the breakup story 3 different times. That's okay. Like, if that's what's helping you process and that's getting it off your chest, that's beautiful. And I only encourage that. Sometimes, the people that are more of that verbal processing, they bring in some of that other embodiment as well. And the people that are tempted to isolate and go primitive can also bring in some of that verbal processing as well, or other externalizing rather than just keeping it as an internal process. I think it's important to bring a little bit of both aspects in.
Eliza, thank you so much for today's podcast. 40 minutes has flown by,
It
and there
did.
has just been so many amazing things that you've said today. I wonder where people can follow you and find out more if they want to continue on the journey of listening to all of your wisdom.
Yep. So you can find me on Sex Cells Podcast, Cells with a C, or my website, email, Instagram is all Eliza Joy Therapeutic Coaching. I know it's very long, but sorry about that.
That's
But
all
you can
good.
find me
I'll
there.
put all the show note, I'll put all the links, all of the
Thanks.
things to Eliza's work in the show notes below. Again, Eliza, thank you so much for joining us on the By Design podcast.
Thank you so much. I had a great time. We'll do it again soon, I'm sure.
I know we will. It's I know we'll have a lot of people asking for more. So yeah, thank you again,
Thanks,
Eliza.
Jesse.